Hello everybody, welcome to the Nimiq Podcast. I am your usual host Richy, and today we will be talking about some new updated version of the Nimiq Wallet. To talk about that, I'm here with Tammo and Julian, UI UX designers from Overnice. Hey guys, how are you feeling?
Feeling good. All the surfing, all the partying is kind of taking a toll, but just kidding. A lot of work, a little sleep, but still feeling fine.
Okay, so maybe for people watching, introduce yourselves quickly. Julian, what do you take care of? What is your domain? And Tammo, what's your domain?
Yeah, so we're taking care of UX, UI, brand, and everything that comes with that. That includes all the Nimiq products, and that also includes brand design. I personally am on the design side of things, a little bit on the front end side of things as well, but it's mainly design, brand design, product design. We have a team of people as well, that we work on the products with. And yeah, that's what we do pretty much.
Yeah, and also, as it was the case for USDC, the crypto concepts are kind of always throwing some challenges at us where you can't just use established concepts, but you have to kind of find some workarounds. Yeah. Except for USDC.
Okay, and you guys have been contributing with Nimiq for like the beginning of the project, but you are also part of, or you're the founders of Overnice. Maybe you can tell us quickly what is Overnice, and then we move on with the topics of this podcast.
Yeah, sure. I mean, Overnice is a boutique UI UX agency. Also, we do a lot of branding. We're from Berlin, based there, every once in a while in Costa Rica for our most beloved client Nimiq, which you're absolutely right, Richy. We've been with Nimiq for quite some while. And I think that, maybe it's also kind of like a nice transition into the whole USDC topic, because we created the wallet, and I guess as it's the cause with all things, at some point you're also happy with what you have, and we think it's pretty important to always kind of shake it up a little bit, don't get too content with what you have. And so also we took the USDC integration as basically a chance to also look at some other concepts that we have in the wallet, make sure they are, still applicable, and took the chance to implement some feedback, improve some situations in the wallet, and basically went beyond simply getting USDC into there.
I think in general, with every major change or every major addition that we do, we kind of have to look at the whole thing, because you can keep, if you keep adding things, at some point you might have a product that really doesn't fit anymore any of those. So with every big thing that we add, we really need to make sure that the underlying thing still makes sense. Like the new structure with every feature that is in there still makes sense as a whole. Like a product story still makes sense, I guess. And with USDC, this definitely was one of the bigger things, because we're adding a full new currency in there, which changes a lot in terms of how you look at the wallet and what it is.
Yeah, I guess you always, or not always, but very often have those products that grow and features are being added, and there's pretty much clutter being added, right? I feel similar to you seeing a child grow up, right? If you see the child growing up every day, you're not really gonna notice all those changes. And then if you see a child, like, I don't know, every once a year, you're gonna be like, oh my God, you've gotten so big. So you could, I don't know, maybe almost say every time you add something, you also have to exclude something to kind of maintain this equilibrium.
Yeah, it's probably not always possible, but that's definitely the goal, because you don't want to just add complexity, but ideally keep it the same while making the product more powerful. And I guess that was a challenge here. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the changes that we added, actually.
Yeah, let's go and summarize. Let's go into details. Let's summarize all the changes in this new version of the wallet. It's not USDC, of course, is the highlight, but as you mentioned, there's a lot of different things that we worked on.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think there are quite some changes. So you could almost consider this to be a small wallet update in general that includes USDC. You could go so far, I believe. So, I mean, the most obvious thing, of course, is USDC. You can now hold, receive, send USDC in the wallet. You can also swap it to our Aura currencies, NIM and BTC, and that's the main functionality of it, right? But also there are updates to, I guess, most prominently the onboarding. That has, I would say, improved significantly. It's now way quicker. We have an updated interface for swaps. It's just a mild update, but nonetheless making things easier here a little bit. We have a new dashboard overview that shows you the assets that you're holding in a more straightforward way, and that also allows swaps to happen kind of contextualized in your asset distribution. And then lastly, also the whole network view that we have, the world map showing all the browser nodes of NIM was also updated now to also accommodate USDC and BTC.
Okay, cool. So the what other things that maybe Julian, that from the UI changed? I think there's like some new challenges, because before it was only 2 currencies and now we have a third one. So maybe quickly, what are the things that changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think Tammo mentioned a bunch of them already briefly, but basically up until now we had this duality in the wallet, which is basically, hey, we got those 2 currencies and you can just like go from one to the other, which is like a binary thing really, like it's either that or that. But now we have 3, which means a lot of interface elements that we have, or like also a lot of ways how we structure things don't really work anymore. For example, if we look at our swap interface, or also this little distribution bar that we always had below the total balance in the wallet, it's meant for 2 currencies. It really doesn't work with 3, which means we needed a new element. Similar to the general way how we display your different addresses in the wallet, also that like doesn't really work that well anymore, because suddenly it gets crowded. Suddenly we have like more different things in there that's complex. The swap interface itself had the slider from one currency to the other currency. Again, that doesn't really work anymore like that. So we need to either add complexity, or we need to find a completely new way to display things. And that poses some challenges, but also some opportunities, because, for example, when we look at this distribution bar right below our total balance, it's an element that that held a lot of complexity already. It was like we had all the different NIM addresses in there, we had BTC in there, we had like a bit of a distribution, we had tooltips, we had percentages in terms of ratio, like a lot of stuff. And tiny in the middle, we had the swap button that actually make you open the swap dialog. And people struggle to understand that. And now we took this opportunity to rethink this element, to make it simpler, take a lot of complexity away, and bundle it into a new element that is a bit more prominent in the sidebar. It's like kind of a ring that shows my distribution of my three assets, and also has a prominent button to open the swap. And what I like about it is that while adding complexity, we actually simplified the interface. It's something that we also did with the onboarding in a different way, but basically when the Nimiq Wallet started, onboarding was all about NIM, right? Like it was identicon selection, it was your login file and so on. Now with having 3 currencies in there, like it's weird to select an identicon as the first step, because why? Like I don't have a direct connection to why this is relevant right now as a first step when I create an account in this wallet. So what we did was also simplify that, to just like narrow it down to the things that are really, really relevant for the wallet as a whole, and then maybe introduce other concepts that are more specific later on when it comes to the particular currency. Again, here, room for case.
Yeah, I think the onboarding is a great example of also taking the occasion of integrating USDC and taking a good hard look at yourself, right? Figuring out what works well, what doesn't. So as you said, the identicon is something that is tied to my NIM address, right? So it does really have nothing to do with my BTC address or my USDC address, right? Or any of those assets that I hold. At the same time, we came to the conclusion, also talking to users, that being targeted as beginners, we basically expect people to learn about cryptocurrency as they start using our products. And we want to make that as easy as possible for them. That always has been, a complete pillar of what Nimiq is all about. And then we basically figured out, okay, they are supposed to understand things like the login file and, really having your key in your browser. And with the identicons, we basically throw another concept at them that they don't know from any other conventional banking services or something similar. And they have to understand that too. And you could always see users kind of getting to the step and then, kind of being surprised a little bit by those little guys. And then thinking about them, choosing one. And that in a way also is a very nice and meaningful interaction, I would say, because, it goes beyond simply creating an account. There is some emotional connection, I would say, you're forming with your little guy. So all of that is great. And we're not excluding it altogether. We're just taking it out of this very, very first account creation where we really want to make it as easy as possible. If you would then later want to go on, create another NIM address, you get the identicons. But I think it's a good example of, integrating USDC, make the interface make sense for USDC, but also thinking about, okay, what can we improve in general?
That definitely is a big change, I would say, and like a visible change as well. And I guess the second big change in terms of interface is the way that we structure your main wallet view, basically, the way that assets are distributed. And basically what we wanted to do here is to make it really visible what you can do with this wallet, to have this kind of trinity of assets that can interact with each other. And we wanted to highlight this interaction, which is basically a swap, right? While by combining them, by finding visual cues to highlight that swap of those currencies. So basically what we did is, on top of having this kind of simplified distribution chart with a swap button, we also introduced some bit more hidden but easily discoverable entry points into swapping between two currencies directly, without having to go in the swap interface and then choose what you want to swap for each other. But actually, you basically just have to click in between the two boxes and then you open the swap between them.
Yeah, I think that's like a way better, way more intuitive way of going about it. And I think it also kind of leads us to another, I think, very important thing that is basically our mental concept of the wallet, right? What is this product? What is this wallet? What do we envision for it in the future? And there, people might come to the conclusion, okay, there was NIM in the first place, now we have BTC, and now we also have USDC. And we are not trying to do a multi-currency wallet similar to all the other multi-currency wallets that there, right? So we're not simply about adding more currencies, and I think that's also reflected in that interface because it really takes into account what we have and brings us all in a nice context together. And I think let's talk a little bit about that because I think it's a quite important thing to consider about what we believe what this wallet is supposed to do for its users. And that is basically not just have three currencies, but have three currencies that can do very different things, right? So the way that we see it, and you've mentioned that before, that's that trinity, how we call it, right? We want to give NIM as a very performant payment coin. Also there, prospectively with staking capabilities, which is going to be quite huge in terms of what can I actually do with that money. We want to have Bitcoin, which we, consider to be this gold standard of cryptocurrency, nice store of value. And then we also want to have USDC, which is primarily motivated by being stablecoin, right? So what we want allow users to do is take their money, take the value that they hold, and if for whatever reason, their personal preference, they don't want that value to be exposed to volatility, which crypto obviously has, right? We want to enable them to safeguard that value in a stablecoin. And that's the main reason why we're basically integrating USDC here, right? And that also means that you're not going to see another stablecoin integrated in a wallet, because we now have that capability. The wallet now does have that feature. It can hold crypto without volatility. And that's what we consider there basically to be done.
It's not really about currency, it's about features, right? Like
Exactly.
what features, what attributes does that currency bring?
Yeah, and I guess also going forward, that's kind of the way that at least currently we think about that. We want something that is very powerful for the user. We want them to be able to do what they might want to do in the greater scheme of cryptocurrency or even money in general. And that's what we want to enable. And that's what we're going for. And if there is another currency that can do something where we feel, or we also hear from our users, hey, we need this, we actually want this, then that's, a strong candidate for integration. And I think that's also, to have the stablecoin in the first place is mainly motivated because we figured out people using our products, right, the crypto payment link and the wallet in an actual real world capacity, not for speculation, but to accept payments and pay with it. And specifically merchants, small merchants that maybe also be living from month to month, right? They have to pay rent, they have to pay their employees, and I don't know, some bread to make their sandwiches with. That those guys really can't have, the risk of the money that they take in to significantly drop in value. It just does not work for them. They want to use cryptocurrency. They want the financial independence, right? That comes from using cryptocurrency. And they also want to attract new audiences, but they just can't have that risk in their life. And now they don't have to. They can accept them, they can accept Bitcoin, and they can very straightforwardly move it to a stablecoin.
And now that you talk about having multiple currencies, it's also a decision of trying to keep it simple, right? Because we are trying to minimize complexity, and that's also why we are going for like USDC on Polygon. And maybe you guys can discuss or talk a little bit about the challenge of hiding all the complexity of having a layer 2 USDC stablecoin on Ethereum, Polygon, all these things, and the user just see like USDC.
Yeah, I think so. The basically our amazing dev team made our job in a way easy there for the whole gas abstraction, right? So you can simply have USDC on Polygon in the wallet and you don't have to bother about anything else. But I guess that's just the base layer, and it still left us with some challenges. Maybe you want to go into them?
Yeah, so obviously, I guess the straightforwardest way to integrate USDC would have been to integrate Ethereum-based USDC, right? Because it's the most used. If you think about USDC, that's usually what you talk about. But then we also wanted to make it really easy for people to interact with it, to send it and receive it, which makes the whole thing harder because you suddenly, you kind of need this extra technological a mechanism that you don't have to actually hold any Ethereum to pay for the transaction, right? So so our tech team came up with this gas abstraction. Now the problem is that this increases the fees that you have to pay, because you kind of have to have multiple transactions, and then on top of that, Ethereum fees right now are anyway quite high, and if you add up all of that, you actually come to a quite steep price. And that's just something that we figured out that's not going to work.
It jeopardizes this idea of, hey, I have now maybe, from a merchant's perspective, I now have taken in some NIM, I want to safeguard them, but if safeguarding those NIM always comes at a kind of high price tag, then it's not really feasible.
We figured out that payment is actually not even the main use case that we want to support, but actually just having a place in the wallet where you can have a stable currency based on fiat currency. And based on that, we figured out, or the tech team figured out, that we can actually have the same solution on Polygon with very, very low fees, so that it actually is feasible and actually also easy to swap in between those currencies because the fee is so low that I can do it without having to think about it twice, while still providing the same functionality. It just is harder to actually send something, to actually send USDC to someone else, because I always have to make sure that the other person actually also has Polygon USDC, or at least a Polygon USDC address, because there is a substantial risk that you actually lose your funds, which made our job in that regard definitely more difficult, because we bit counterintuitive to simplifying things. What we usually do, we had to put in a lot of warnings and a lot of things to make sure that people don't fuck up, because it's easy to fuck up if you don't really know what's going on under the hood, which is something that we feel like with everything we do, ideally the normal user doesn't have to interact with, because then it gets cumbersome and complicated, and then it's something that I might be like, yeah, well, maybe I'm not getting involved in that.
Yeah, it's basically right, the conscious decision, kind of going for one thing over the other, right? So rather we want to enable users to very cheaply and very quickly and easily swap between those currencies inside of the wallet without paying a lot of fees. That's kind of our main goal. And then we take into account that this is probably not the most straightforward way if you want to people, for example, do payments in USDC, right? And you're absolutely right. I mean, it's kind of, for us, it's kind of the nightmare, right? When we have a situation where we have to include a lot of warnings, where we have to put those safeguards into the user interface. For example, also that the sending and even the receiving, right, requiring this long touch button. The receiving not, right?
It's a different thing. It's like when you save a contact.
Wouldn't it still make sense to have that be part of the send and receive flow?
It's not part of the receive flow, and it's not necessarily part of the send flow, but I would like to talk a little bit about that contact hack that we're basically saying, look, like, it's hard, but also we make it like, we let you save your addresses as contacts, and that's what's hard.
Yeah.
It's, at the point where you have someone saved as a context, from then on it's...
Yeah.
Okay, guys, there's also a super cool feature of the wallet, swapping between two currencies and also adding contacts. Is there anything that changed in there? How did you go about these features in the wallet with the new implementation?
Yeah, so what we have now is a trinity of coins, and it's fairly easy and fairly cheap to exchange them for each other, right? Which is was our main goal. Enable people to quickly get in and out of a stablecoin, enter the volatility, exit volatility. And using Polygon for that is the best choice that was found. But it does include that risk of people not fully understanding that USDC is something that runs on different networks, and that you cannot simply send USDC from Ethereum to USDC on Polygon, which is what we're using. So it put us in a not the greatest spot, because it means we have to include a lot of warnings, and then also some special interactions that make sure you're really making a conscious choice here. You've kind of understood what problems are there, but then yet again, I feel we found a quite good solution there. That it is cumbersome to some degree. We can't abstract all of that, but I think we try to make it as easy as possible, especially for recurring usage.
Yeah. So. I mean, usually when we design a flow, we try to make it as intuitive as possible, so that you kind of have we find the quickest way possible to go through it while doing all the actions that you have to do. In this case, we had to go the opposite way of actually making making a step harder than it would usually have to be, just to kind of make people stop and, look at it again, think at it again and be like, okay, wait a minute, this shouldn't be that hard, so there's probably a reason for it. And where we did this is, it's based on an idea that we had, that we're saying it has to be hard to send a transaction to another USDC address because we need to make sure that people know that it's actually a Polygon address. And we kind of have to make that hard because otherwise people might send it to the wrong network and then they lose all their money. But at the same time, we figured out once I already did that check, I don't have to do it again. And we can help people remember that. So basically, as part of a send process in USDC, which is basically similar to the send process in NIM, I create a contact, or I'm prompted to create a contact in my contact book in the wallet. And adding this contact is the thing that we made hard. We introduced a long press button that I actually have to press for a couple of seconds until it actually saves the contact. But after that, I don't have any warnings anymore. If I send to that contact again, I still have some notes so that I can, that I can refresh my mind of what's going on. But there's no extra barriers anymore. So from that point on, the process is as simple as possible. But yeah, we had to put in those barriers. And I think that also was an extra challenge because it goes against what we usually do. Kind of have to bring yourself in the complete opposite position of thinking about how can we make this harder than it is.
Yeah, it's always, I find it's always interesting, this kind of balance between, making sure that users know, being super, throw some like warning colors in their face and really, make sure they got it. But at the same time, of course, nobody wants an interface that feels scary, right? Nobody wants to feel like, oh, I'm at danger here. So finding this kind of sweet spot where we can be decisive and hey, you need to understand this, but at the same time also, it's still fine. You can do it. It's not actually difficult.
I would even argue that if we would go this other direction of just having a lot of warnings and text in red and orange in there, it wouldn't even have that effect, because if like all you see is red and orange warnings, at some point you're basically like, okay, they are there. I've seen a lot of them already. You don't even read them anymore. You kind of get very easily and very quickly, I think, you get so used to them that it's just like, that it doesn't even have that warning effect anymore. So doing something else, something that kind of rattles your cage a little bit, is like, maybe let me hold on for a second. I think that's really the way to go. And
yeah, I agree. And in the end, I think, also with communication left and right about it, some general education about what we're doing here, I think also people are going to be fine. I hope so. If you're watching this, please don't send USDC from any other network than Polygon to a Nimiq wallet.
Very good advice, warning. Thanks a lot. And maybe to have a final question, I'm curious, for this new version of the wallet, what was your maybe most challenging part, and what was the most enjoyable? Not now that we have the wallet out, what is the thing that you enjoyed the most about it?
I think the most enjoyable part, to start with that, definitely was to find a bunch of things, a bunch of elements that are in there for a long while already, and figure out that there's ways to simplify them. Even after, we've iterated this wallet for years now, and it's usually quite a challenge to keep the complexity at the same level while adding things. And for me personally, it's just very enjoyable to figure out, hey, we can actually simplify it while adding something new. I really like that. I guess I would say the most challenging part was finding this initial concept of integrating a third currency into a structure that is already there, and that's something that we haven't talked about, but while also having quite a tight timeline. We had a plan to release this in quite a short time, which also meant that every solution that we came up with had to be possible to implement quite straightforwardly and quite quickly.
Yeah, like working on a very tight timeline, having to juggle this kind of complexity at the same time. But then I think also what I thought was interesting and a very nice thing to do is kind of taking also a step back and again looking at the wallet and figuring out what is this product actually supposed to do, right? What are those currencies supposed to do for their users, and how can we present to them, provide them with a concept of how to use the currencies, something that's reflected in our new onboarding slides. If you're creating a new wallet, you can see there's like a little guided tour, right? That will tell you what basically our attention is behind the different assets. And yeah, I think that all in all was quite the enjoyable exercise. And I mean, it was tight, right? And a lot in short time, but I mean, that's also fun.
Yeah, and I guess like I would also say that it was quite nice how everything fit together in the end. How, you know, like how the different parts of the project, also the different people involved, it just flowed a lot.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm super curious what people also have to say about it, right? I guess we're quite content with ourselves and happy with the result, but looking forward to some feedback there. Yeah,
Definitely.
Okay. So, any final thoughts? Anything you want to close? Any final remarks?
Yeah, so I'm very curious what the community in general has to say about how they feel about it. I'm especially curious about how you guys feel about not having the identicons anymore in the onboarding. I guess that's a bit of an emotional topic, at least it was for us or also for the whole team, you know. It felt a little bit like betraying those little guys. Still, I think it was the absolutely right choice to make here. The resulting simplified onboarding, I think, is a pretty good step. But what do you think about it? I'd be curious.
Yeah, like I mean, every time we make changes, every time we change the interface, obviously that's like it's something that we do based on what we think would be best, what's right, based on, you know, also of course based on feedback and all. But in the end, it's always a guess. So yeah, really looking forward to feedback. What do you guys have to say?
Okay, remember you can share your feedback in the comments below. Also, we have forum.nimiq.community where you can add a post and share your feedback. And just reach out to us in the community. Tell us what you think. Thanks a lot for joining me, Tammo, Julian from Overnice. It was amazing and hope to see you soon again.
Sure do.